One of Europe's most wanted men has been found guilty of the brutal torture and murder of a dad of two on a Cheshire farm. Christopher Guest Moore, an undercover TV researcher, fled the UK 2 days after murdering Brian Waters in front of his children in 2003. He spent 16 years on the run and was living in Malta under the false name when police caught up with him in 2019. This week, a jury convicted the 43-year-old of murder by a majority of 10-2, more than 18 years after the killing. And today, after 12 hours and 12 minutes of deliberations, the jury also found him guilty by a majority verdict of conspiracy to cause GBH to Suleiman Razak, who worked on the cannabis farm and was tortured at the same time as the 2003 murder. Moore was wearing a grey tracksuit and white shirt, and he shook his head as the verdicts were returned. In May, a jury was discharged after it failed to agree on verdicts, and a retrial at Chester Crown Court began in November. Moore claimed he had befriended Manchester-based drug dealer John Wilson, one of 3 men already convicted of the murder, because he thought he could sell a story on him being a police informant to the media, and he might lead him to a cannabis farm, which he could film for a Channel 4 Dispatches documentary. Mr. Waters, a cannabis dealer who was growing the drug from Burnt House Farm near Knutsford, Cheshire, owed Wilson a drugs debt of around £20,000, the court heard. Moore, who had done undercover TV work, including with journalist Donald McIntyre, discovered where the cannabis farm was after following Mr. Waters' son, Gavin, who was then aged 25. On June the 29th, 2003, Mr. Waters was tortured and killed at the farm in front of his daughter Natalie, who had just turned 21, and Gavin, while his wife Julie was abducted from the family home and driven to the farm. Mr. Waters and Mr. Razak, who survived the 4-hour ordeal, were tied up and suspended from rafters, beaten, dropped in barrels of liquid, and had staple guns used on their bodies and were assaulted with metal bars. When police arrived at the scene, following a call made from a phone box by Wilson's driver David Moran, they found a bag containing cigarette ends, drink bottles, and even a bag of shit, which all had traces of Moore's DNA. James Raven, who did the television work with Moore, and Otis Matthews have also been convicted of the murder at earlier trials. Giving evidence, Moore, who had been working as a yacht captain and businessman in Malta, claimed he had gone to the farm that morning to steal cannabis equipment, but left when he had an argument with Raven and realised Wilson, who was not at the scene, had discovered he was working undercover. He left the country for Spain for 2 days later, and after travelling to South Africa, Mozambique and Turkey, he settled in Malta. He was arrested in 2019 in Malta, where he had been living under his new name, Andrew Lamb. Detective Inspector Kate Tomlinson, the senior investigating officer, said Mr. Waters' family continued to be affected by the crime. She said they have remained very insular and haven't been able to move on with their lives. They have remained very scared to this day because somebody's been outstanding for the murder of their husband and father.
We worked really hard with the Spanish authorities trying to trace and locate him. We sent staff out there, and we were trying to develop intelligence to try and house him in a location so that we could detain him. We weren't able to do that, and we were disappointed that we weren't able to do that. And we worked for a number of years with the Spanish authorities trying to find Christopher Guest Moore Jr. What's evident now is that he'd assumed a new identity. He had secured a passport in the name of Andrew Lamb, and essentially by taking on that new identity, it made our job really, really difficult. We simply couldn't trace him. We've never given up hope of trying to find Christopher Guest Moore. Through the years, we have assessed and reassessed all the intelligence and our intelligence tactics to try and develop ways to try and find him. Obviously, technology has increased, reach of things like digital media has increased. And in May 2019, we were able to put Christopher Guest Moore Jr. on Europe's Most Wanted list. That meant that we had a really broad international reach, both with law enforcement partners, but also people who give us intelligence and information. We had 2 crucial bits of information, and we were able to work with the NCA, the International Liaison Officer Network, to develop that information, and that meant that we were able to house him in Malta. What we know now is that he had acquired identification documents in the false identity of Andrew Lamb from about 2007. In that identity, he really established himself. He had a partner. He was living as a prosperous businessman, making links internationally, buying and selling items, and he had a role as a captain on yachts. So he would be commissioned, if you like, to captain a yacht with families and holiday makers. Clearly, it's a very serious crime. We were obviously very determined to bring Christopher Guestmore Jr. to justice. We've got a really good track record of tracking people internationally. We've had some great success recently of bringing people back from both Malta and also in Dubai. So from a Cheshire perspective, we will never give up. I would want people to always be looking over their shoulders. Don't be comfortable, don't get settled, because we will always be coming for you.
Judge Sir Peter Openshaw said Moore would be sentenced on Friday, which is tomorrow. Following the verdict, Detective Inspector Tomlinson added, "Today, Christopher Guestmore Jr. has finally been found guilty of his part in the brutal murder of Brian Waters at Burnt Farmhouse on June the 19th, 2003. He fled the UK 2 days after the incident and stole another man's identity in a bid to evade justice. We never gave hope of finding him over the years, and the guilty verdict marks a significant point in a long, painful road for all those involved. The level of violence used against the victims in this case was absolutely shocking. As police officers, we are used to dealing with violent crime, but this barbaric nature of this attack is something that you never forget. When you look at what happened at the farm that day and what those men did, it feels like something you only ever see in movies. It doesn't feel like something that could ever happen in real life, let alone in rural Cheshire."
So today, after a trial, Christopher Guestmore has been found guilty of the murder of Brian Waters and conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm against Suleiman Razak. We mustn't forget that Suleiman Razak was also a victim in this. I can't tell you how, that amazing that feels, all the hard work that everybody's put into this, but for the family, how grateful that they are, and how grateful that Suleiman Razak is, that really justice has been served in this case. So when you look at the nature of what happened on that day, the horrific nature of what happened, it is something that you only ever see it in the movies. It's not something that happens in rural Cheshire, is it? That it was torture for those men. They were there for over 4 hours. They were tied up. They were hung upside down. There was a staple gun involved. There were lots of things that happened to those men that you just think, it blows your mind really what happened to them. And stuff like this just does not happen every day. So I'd like to thank all the police officers who've been involved in this, all their dedication and hard work. I'd like to thank our CPS colleagues who, have committed months of their lives full time to this investigation. Our colleagues within Serious and Organised Crime Unit, National Crime Agency, Maltese authorities, civilian investigators. There's lots of colleagues across the organisation that have played a part in this. Everybody has played a crucial part in getting this man to trial, getting this guilty verdict and justice for this family. The family, we've spoken to the family, and the after effects that they've felt have been really, really significant. You speak to them and they've never really come through this. They've never really moved on. So they are just truly, truly grateful and thankful for the efforts that have happened to bring this man back to this country, to face a trial and to find justice today means so much to them.
Here's a little bit more on the murderer who went on the run for 16 years as he was living a luxurious lifestyle as a businessman and a yacht captain in Malta. Christopher Guestmore, 2 days after the killing, he flew to Spain with his then partner. His girlfriend moved on to Ibiza to meet friends, but Moore stayed in Malaga, where his father, Christopher Guestmore Sr., flew out to see him the following month and returned with Moore's phone, and his father was actually later sentenced to 9 months prison for assisting an offender. But Mr. Moore also had links with royalty. So during a trial at Chester Crown Court, as it was heard that he was in Spain, then he travelled to South Africa, he went to Mozambique, Turkey, and then he eventually settled in Malta. But the trial heard that he had sent surveyors to Tangier port after being invited by the Moroccan royal family and discussed deals to deliver goods to countries such as Iran and Libya. In his closing speech, Nigel Power QC prosecuting told the jury Moore must have told lie after lie to his girlfriend of 15 years who did not know he was on the run for murder. At the time of his arrest, Moore worked out on Port Masso Harbour and was living in a new build apartment in the town of Soiki in northern Malta, but had previously been living in a large house with a swimming pool. He drove a white Porsche Cayenne, and in 2019, the fugitive was put on Europe's most wanted list, which police said led to crucial pieces of intelligence coming to light. As stated at the start of the video, there was Moore and Raven, and they were asked to locate a cannabis farm for covert filming by a production company working for Dispatches, which was on Channel 4. And they were filming a program about the reclassification of the drug. The prosecutor said, but although they said that they had located an illegal grow, what is sometimes called a cannabis farm, this avenue was not pursued, and the program was transmitted without any work from Mr. Moore or Mr. Raven. So Mr. Moore was the undercover reporter. The court then heard Mr. Waters had set up a cannabis farm with his friend Mujahid Majid, also known as Johnny, back in 2002. And this was the farm that was set up in Burnt House Farm in Tabley, the area where ultimately Mr. Waters was to be murdered. And following the guilty verdict, Brian Waters' family said in a statement, "We would like to thank detectives from Cheshire Constabulary, the prosecution team and everyone else involved in the case for all of their hard work and tireless and extensive investigations, which now span more than 18 years. We would also like to extend our thanks to the family liaison officers for their help, advice and support over the years." What happened at Burnt House Farm on the 19th of June 2003 has had a significant and long-lasting effect on our family. We will never be able to forget the events of that day, and even now, more than 18 years down the line, we feel the pain on a daily basis with constant flashbacks. We have remained a close-knit family and have provided much-needed support to each other, but this has been an isolating experience for us, and not only have we lived in fear of reprisals, we have also struggled to trust others as we normally would. But we never gave up hope, and the verdict today marks the end of an incredibly painful journey in our lives. So guys, that's a story coming in where an undercover TV researcher who became one of Europe's most wanted has been found guilty of a torture murder. Rest in peace, Mr. Waters. And condolences go out to your family. It's your boy GT. Keep it locked, keep it real.